Alrighty, so I've started with a simple modular wall piece. It's just a half piece, which will be copied and flipped, and then it'll be all modular, all that. So simply, it's mainly just smooth mesh stuff. Very little detail in the actual high poly model itself. All of the detail will be put in Photoshop using Endo 2, and then that normal map's going to be converted into a cavity and a ambient occlusion map. So I've already made a low poly of this mesh, UV'd it and baked all this detail to a starting normal map. So I hide that, and this is what we have right now. So a simple tileable wall piece. So yeah, all of it's already normal mapped. I'll stop them there. So, yeah, and this piece here is only about 900 triangles. So not too bad at all. So you are annoying me. Fuck off. And screw you. Alright, so what we're going to do now is go into Endo 2 and alter the normal map to give it far more detail later on. So we'll just hop into Photoshop, like this. And this is our normal map I baked from XNormal. And along with that I baked a SplatMap, which again we're going to alter to give it far more detail. It's essentially the same process both ways. So this is a 40, I think it's a 4K map. Yep, a 4K map. So basically what we're going to do is we start off big so we can then make it smaller and retain as much detail as possible without it blurring or getting too many artifacts. Now if you notice, the normal map on some of these parts is very faint, so you can't really see it. That's mainly because in Maya, a lot of those parts, like this bit here, they're flat, so really there's nothing for it to project on. But we can fix that in Photoshop later. So we're just going to add some indentations, maybe some scratches and stuff like that, just to give it a bit more character. So yeah. Right, so first thing I want to do is go back in Photoshop and start detailing this normal map. You see I've got two layers up here. This is the base bake from XNormal. See, it's very flat and bland. All I did here was duplicate the layer and put it into hard light mode, which sort of multiplies the effect. You can use overlay, but sometimes that gives you artifacts. Most of the time gives you the same sort of effect. Normally just use hard light because, it's what I've been using for ages and it's always worked for me. Alright, so we'll just collapse that, name it, name normal. Yeah. Another thing we need to do before we start is we jump back into Maya, grab our mesh, go into UV editor, and save out a snapshot. Make sure the size is correct. Just dump it on my desktop. Small 01. Okay on that. It's done. Save it. And I'll just bring that in. And I'll just paste it on top. There we go. You won't be able to see it, but if you just create a style sheet, it's basically just color overlay flat green, and that'll make everything a lot nicer to use. This way we can just know where all our boundaries are, so we don't make details that are unnecessary and just wasting space. So just leave that there, and yeah. So now I'll make a new group in between the normal and the UV, and this is where we're going to start detailing our normal. So if we want to start, say we start over here. So this is the left end, I believe, which is, you go away, which is this bit here. So these polygons here. So thinking I could just do a sort of indentation and paneling around here. So grab our pen tool, and we're going to be primarily working in black and white, because that's how Endo 2 makes its normal maps. Now before we start, we want to make sure we name and save every individual detail we use, because after it's done we're going to be copying them all into the SplatMap texture and colouring them accordingly to how we want the final piece to look. So won't worry about that now, we'll worry about that later. So left and detail. That'll do. So what I'll do is just make a quick detail like so. Make sure I line it up like that. Then I'll fill the path, or better yet, I'll curve some of these parts. Make selection, select smooth, about 15. Yeah, looks good. And then we'll fill that. Okay, so now we'll make a new layer. Left and detail 1. So let's name that detail 0. Now I think I will put some, maybe some bolts or something in there. Nothing fancy, just a few circles. And I'll give that a sort of grey, just so we can tell it apart later on. So I'll just put that in all the corners. That. Oops. And there. And so I'll move those one. That one. Oh. That one. And that one. Move them back a bit. Now you don't want to go too far to the edge, otherwise when you turn them into a normal map with Endo 2, they might bleed through the edge and it'll just look stupid. So that looks alright. And now that they're done, we'll collapse them and rename it. Now you can always come back to these other areas and add more detail if you want. So I'll just do maybe 2 more, then I'll skip ahead to the finished product, because it's essentially just the same process all around. Just do grayscale imaging, just layers upon layers on all the detail parts you want, and then you'll end up with a very complex looking normal map. So I'll just do a few more on the video, then I'll skip ahead. I'll make a new layer, right, left, and detail 2. So I think this time I'll focus on this bit here. I'll give it sort of a pattern across the middle. So, oh, I know. Stop fucking up Photoshop. Yeah. I'll grab the rounded edge. It's my favourite tool ever. And just approximate the centre. Move it up bits. Now remember, this is going to be mirrored, so if at any point you don't want to have gaps in between the mirrored areas, just move it over like that. Fill the path. Now I'll cut some bits out of it. So guide, rectangular tool again, make a selection and delete. And do that again. I'll make a little outcrop on the same layer, since it's going to be part of the same detail. And I actually think I'll spacing. Oh, actually. I think I'll do this. Oops. Photoshop will begin to chug when you're working on such a high resolution image with so many layers. Basically, at the end of this, you could end up with maybe 100 separate layers, which you're going to have to go through each one individually. It's a lot of tedious work, and in some cases it can take a long time, but let me tell you, the payoff is totally worth it. So I'll just do the same thing here with the bolts. Now let's make these actually cut into the mesh. So instead, what I'm going to do is grab my elliptical tool. Another thing you want to watch out for is the size of the tool, or size of the shape you're making. Basically, you never want to have a disproportionate size. So always make it proportionate. Never have something like 200 pixels in width and 178 in height. Otherwise, when it comes to scaling down the image to a game-ready texture, you'll get a lot of artifacts and aisling especially around edges and curves and stuff like that. So just keep it consistent, guys. Let's just make this 52. Oh yeah, 52 will work. And yeah, that's an layer. Let's fill path. And I'm just using black because what I'm going to do is, one sec. Don't snap. What I'm going to do is take these black objects, do a selection on them all, and delete. Pretty much just make a hole in this layer here. So, from the edge, let's make it 20 deep. Edge. Oh, fucking 20 deep. Okay. Merge them. Actually, that'll do. So, Control click on the layer to select all the pixels in that area. I'll hide that layer, select the other one beneath it, and delete. And now we have some nice holes in it. And what we're going to do is make another indentation sort of detail. So I'll unhide that layer. You don't delete it yet, or you can if you want to. It'll just mean you have to just means it'll take longer to do. So select the pixels in that layer again. If Photoshop will fucking let me. There we go. Select, modify, contract. Now the circle was 52 pixels, so I'll make it contract by 6 pixels. That'll still keep it. Yeah, you know, thingy. Then I'll just make new layer, paint on it, deselect, and now we don't need that one. And now we have that. Just rename it, and detail 3. There we go. Essentially, it's pretty much the same process all around, everywhere. Just need to be creative in how you're doing stuff. So I'll skip ahead to the finished grayscale blockout, and we'll come back and finish things from there.